everyone, welcome back to another episode of the ByteTalk podcast. Today we are extremely excited to chat with our good friend Jonathan Neal. Hey Jonathan, how are you?
Well, hi. I am happy to be here. Thank you.
We're so excited to have you here, John. I don't know if you remember this, but I actually interviewed you on April in 2013. So it's been 8 years since I actually had a conversation with you in a public forum. So I wanted to start just by asking, what changed since then, since 2013? How's life?
I'm ready to answer those whiteboard problems now. It's okay. I've worked through a lot of the issues with promises, and I'm ready now. Wow, what's new? Well, instead of CSS, I find myself working on CSS now, and yet that's it's something new now, though. I really enjoyed working on the PostCSS preset env project, and actually, I think I started that project when we were working on a project together. I was throwing a bunch of things together to write CSS using bleeding edge specs, not knowing what was real, what was not going to happen. And I remember one thing that happened was everything that I would put into the project just said, Jonathan Neal, Jonathan Neal. And you were like, is this all real or is it Jonathan Neal? And that gave me an idea. I changed a username on GitHub to CSS Tools. It's not me. It's the tools. You can trust them. And to this day, that project is under the CSS Tools namespace, just in case anyone else knows to be a little concerned with what I write. It's not me. It's a different picture.
That is a pro tip. Let's get this pro tip on the record. If you have any concerns, just change your name to a bot, and then you'll be fine. Oh, that's great.
Mm-hmm. How many repos are inside that account now?
Well, in the CSS Tools repo itself, I'm guessing there's 60 to 70, possibly. That could be a high number, because there's also some that are in the PostCSS repo, because they were originally built by Andrew and folks as part of PostCSS getting its name out there, saying, hey, look, we've got these tools that are really helpful to you. So it's split between those two. And then they all get packaged together into the great big preset env, which also lives on CSS Tools. You can trust them. It's not me.
Yeah, I know you're really big into PostCSS, and I'm actually curious, how do you see the ecosystem today? And also, what makes you really excited about that technology?
Well, we are entering a new era where we went from parsers that were written as Rhino and in Ruby, and then we wrote them all in JavaScript, and now we're rewriting them for WASM. We've got ones in Go, we've got ones in Rust. I think today Next.js launched a new version 11 that has a Rust compiler, and it's so much faster. We kind of learned this from ES Build. It really opened the gates to maybe we should go back to writing it in a different language there. And that is going to happen to CSS. But what's going to happen differently this time is that PostCSS was written looking at CSS, mostly Bootstrap, the file, that big file you could get, and it was reverse engineered, which is incredible. They're going through the file and just going, oh, okay, it looks like this is where this breaks up into a rule. But meanwhile, there was this specification out there that told you what to do. And so the most widely used and successful, CSS pre-compiler outside of Sass, and I feel they're both so helpful. I don't even try to compare them. Just whoever uses what they use, you get so much out of it. But the difference is that PostCSS was never actually parsing CSS the way that some folks might have thought it was getting parsed. And so a lot of plugins required a lot of extra knowledge or a lot of extra tools to get things done. I know that because I wrote a bunch of plugins and I was like, wait, I need to get this package right? And then you just get dependencies, and you build this tribal knowledge of how to be successful in this world. Well, now that these new ones are being written, I've been able to see that they're all following the spec. Like, that means that if we write tools like preset env for these compiled versions, then we could actually test them against like web platform tests. We could have interoperability between the browser and between these CSS polyfills. That's something that we kind of saw with Babel, right? We kind of saw that happening where you could get these stage 0, stage 1, and we were figuring it out. We all were like, that's fine, stage 0. And then we're like, why did it change? And like, well, it was stage 0. And well, you told us we could have it, so we want it, right? And that kind of happened with CSS too, but it was a little safer, it was a little more removed. But now that they're going to be able to talk to each other using the same abstract terms, like, hey, this is a value, this is a declaration, like all these like things that you just kind of intuit when you're writing CSS. The important thing is now when you go to write, like for a modern project, it's going to compile faster, and you're going to be able to know that it's going to work a lot better because it's tested against the same things that the browser tests against. Which means if we write something that doesn't exist in a browser yet, we could write the polyfill, make sure it works just the way it's going to work, right? You as the developer can use the tool you want and know that it will seamlessly move into production.
This is amazing.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
The future.
The future. So take me back to like the first day or week or month or year, whatever your memory has there, of John Neal like writing first line of CSS or first reading the first documentation, whatever. What was that like? Where did you enter that?
Yeah. Technically, when you're playing on an Amiga as a kid, you're writing. You're getting used to using the keyboard. You're getting used to doing something, clicking, interacting. You know, those like old school music apps where you could punch notes on a page and then push play. Like my first programming experience was probably Mario Paint, and it was really great, and I loved it. The move from that to like building something that I felt like I was sharing with a community larger than a local community was actually when I started in tech. I was like a camp counselor for kids having a really cool summer. And it was junior high kids, which are the coolest kids, right? And then the summer was over and I was like, I need to make like at least $30. That would be really cool. And someone was like, hey, we need a website. And we don't, here's a picture of it. Here's a JPEG. And I went on IRC and I started coding something that I didn't fully understand. And they told me to bring it to somebody who like, they'll put it on the web. And that person was this cool dude named Brian Chan, who turned out to own a company that did tech. And I was like, I am a camp counselor. I have no idea what I'm doing here. But look, I have done web thing. Yeah. Would you like to give me $30? Because it was really good. Like there's burgers involved. It was great. He's like, how would you like to do this? And so I got introduced into tech. As in when someone asked me about JavaScript and jQuery, I mean, I remember not even knowing what those were. Like, are these new languages? Is this yet another language? And so I learned the chops there. And I remember it started off with somebody like over the keyboard, like, okay, here's how you get Java. All right, you've just set an environment variable. And I was like, ooh, well, this will make a web page. And then like a website appeared on my computer and it's like I could leave the room and it was still there. This was like super exciting, okay? And so then it was like, hey, could you make this thing that you see this picture? Could you make it? And so my introduction into web, those first few lines were started in CSS. It was like, even though I feel like I am not a designer, I really loved realizing design. It was really fun to think about like looking at a two-dimensional picture and imagining what it would be like in a three-dimensional space, where you're like not only bringing something new to it, but you're like, it's like you're nodding like acknowledgement to the person who designed it, to be like, I know what you meant to happen here. You know, and I got to experiment. I remember one of the first things I built was like a Super Mario Brothers theme for a web page. And I was like, what would they have wanted it to be? Like, what a cool question to get to ask. What would Super Mario Brothers have wanted to be as a web page? And so that was that first week, month, year. It went by so fast. I had no idea. I mean, from camp to computers was so short that the weekend after I started at LifeRay, I went back to camp for the cleanup day. So like they were just completely crossed over, and I got my $30.
How was that feeling? Like making money with something that, supposed to be like something you're just playing with, not necessarily like work. How was that transaction feel like?
It was backwards in the best ways at first, because I didn't understand what was happening, even though there were some older, wiser people trying to tell me what was going on and what it meant. Like you realize when we build these tools and people use them, they could use them so many different ways. And you realize that when you make a piece of software, like the concept of when I would write code, it was like permanent at first. Like, oh, I wrote this and now it exists. And just like making a video or doing a skit, when it was over, it was always going to be a little bit different and a little bit more each time. But with code, even though that's similar, you find yourself reliving the same take you did before. You find yourself revisiting one scene from a previous play. And that was, even though people tried to tell me, sustainability, like you build something, you release it, now you support it. I was not expecting that. I was just elated that I could afford to drive to work. My first week, my car ran out of like gas going down a hill to work. And like work was at the bottom of a hill. And so I popped it in neutral, and then a cop pulled me over for going like 10 miles over the speed limit. And I was like, and so I told him, I was like, I'm so sorry, but I'm out of gas. And so I popped the car in neutral, and he's like, son, never tell anyone that. That's like illegal. Here's a ticket. Oh goodness. And I was like, and I've got a job to pay for it. And I was, so I was too excited. What is that? We could do it. I didn't think about what would happen if we did. And that took a long, long time to realize that like, oh, I'm still working on this project that I started like 10 years ago. There's no way I could have known. So that process is still ongoing for me, but there has been constant awakenings, and I'm so grateful for the constant code and social awakenings that have happened as being part of the web community.
Wow, that's such a beautiful story. I'm curious too. Like, so you went from there. You've done a lot of freelance work over the years. You've done a lot of open source community work, and then even recently, you've done some amazing work at like Modulz and these up and coming companies. What has that experience been, kind of going to different forms of work and also expressing yourself? And because I can tell that it's not just a job for you. You love the web, you love CSS, you love all these, you love the community. So what is it maneuvering those different kinds of work amidst having it also be a passion?
Yeah. So like shout out to the, Gitter PostCSS channel that just had an amazing community. So yes, the community is incredible. I'm thinking about, there's something there. There's like, my brain is just going to the most surreal thing that happens is that I would find myself solving problems without use cases everywhere. everywhere I would go, I would find myself trying to solve problems no one was asking for to be solved. Like, they weren't even necessarily problems they were having. This got me in a great deal of trouble. Not even just like trouble, like a manager going like, why? What is a side project? Like, what's this? Why do you want to put this into our work? Like, why do you want to put this side project in? I thought that as I got better at this, I would stop doing that, or that everything I would do would be more on target, or I would have a bunch of things kind of off target, but like 1 out of every 10 would at least be like, we really needed this. And then a really great project manager named Cynthia said to me that whenever I came into a project, it would just cause like a cyclone. Like a bunch of unexpected things would start spinning up into development. And where I was at when I started, it worked well that you could tangent into these worlds. But as I started to work at other companies, sometimes I found myself just devastated that I loved the people I was working with, and I wasn't very good at doing what they wanted. And I wanted to follow so badly. Like, I wanted to fix their problems. And I'd be like, oh, I see. Your problem is this, you need a better framework. And they're like, we'd like to add a copy paste feature. And I'm like, no, we need a whole new deployment strategy. Like, it was like awful. And I couldn't turn it off. And so I found that what I needed to do was I needed to kind of like accept that and just stop trying to marry my job. Because I realized, because I do what I love, that's that thing you said to me that made me like get all solemn. I was like, that's the consequence. When you do what you love, you answer to what you love. And that's a problem when your mind wants to answer to your job, your mind wants to answer to the people you care about, but you're like, oh man, I gotta paint this other picture. I have to. It's important. Oh.
I can totally relate to what you're saying. You know, like, I feel like as creators, we also attach our identity to the products that we are building. And then when someone comes to you and say, hey, that product sucks, you know, now you get like super defensive because you think that your identity is part of the product. And then you're not criticizing just the product, you're criticizing me too. So having that, like, just like detach from like, okay, I can still love what I do, but it doesn't define me. It's super tricky, right? Like figuring that out. How was for you, John?
I kind of have a question for you about that. Do you find that it also works the other way, that when your friends or people that you admire work on projects and people go and attack it or say, oh, it's not really actually the best thing ever, that you find this like strange amount, like lack of restraint that you have when people attack your own work? You're like, oh, I am bad. You're right. I need to be better. But like somebody like picks on like your buddy's project and you're like, no, we're a community. We're a community. We support each other.
Yeah, totally. I feel that so much. And I feel like there's so much negativity outside, you know, like people, they say, oh, Next.js sucks, you know, like, and you're like, oh no, like it's amazing. Like PostCSS, it's amazing. And maybe a certain tool might not be the best use case for what you're doing right now, but that doesn't make it a bad tool. Just makes it a bad tool for the problem that you are trying to solve. And I feel like people have a hard time just like, you know, crossing that line and making assumptions about a product that is based on what they're trying to solve, right?
You are so right. It is so easy to just say, that tool just, it cost me time, and so now I will tell you all the things that it's not good enough at. And then the next version of that, the evolved version of that, is a list, like a manifesto. Like I want Safari to get more money, right?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
I want I want Google to spend more time telling me about toast before it happens. Like we like evolve these critiques and stuff, but like to me, that third level, it isn't the great it depends answer. It is, what do we want to see happen? Like, if I were them and I agreed with my critique, what would help me get that thing that I want? Like, if I lost time on this and I wanted it to be different, like knowing that won't happen because of a company, it'll happen because of the people that work there. Like, how do I shape my critique? Who do I reach out to, and what do I do? Because a manifesto might be great, except that maybe the way their company works, they have like a planning committee in time, and it's going to be very hard for your like Medium post to get in there. You might even discourage them. They might say, "Oh, why are we spending all this money on Edge when we could just switch to Chromium?" Like, because there's this bad sentiment, and then oh no, we lost an engine. But it's like, well, I mean, how are we framing our critique to get what we actually think would be best? That to me is what I'd love to see us, myself included, get better at, which is getting over the hurt so that we can think about what we want.
Totally, man. And I feel like it's so much easier to criticize companies, like especially like we can talk about Google, Apple, like how are they investing on their browsers? Could it be more or less? Or like why are they using certain engines? But what happens when you're criticizing a open source project that is dependent on people's free time, like time that they could be spending with their kids, but now they're not. They're just like trying to solve that problem. And then someone comes in and gives like a super like hurtful message on GitHub, so that's what worries me the most, because at the end of the day, like people are using their free time to do this, and we have to be more respectful about how we approach criticisms that way.
I would like to share a story that I am not prepared for it, but it's very relevant to this, which was when I moved from California to Georgia. That is across a large continent, and I was now in a place where I didn't know many people. And I had a job waiting for me, and I didn't really understand that job when I got there. And they knew it, and I knew it. And I only worked there for 3 or 4 weeks. It was that short. And then I found myself in Georgia with my family being brought over and not having a job. And that company, I only got to know a few people because it was only, I was learning where the bathroom was. And then suddenly realizing like I was going to have to find a new job. And I was in a parking lot, like crying, like, what have I done? What's going to happen? And the person who was there comforting me was Henry, who maintains Babel. Like, and so now when I saw that critique, it's not the same. It's not like, how do I quantify like, I was crying and this person was there for me. I moved across the country. You can't tell that to a Reddit thread. You can't open up. It feels like you'd just be trying to steal the spotlight or something. But those are the kinds of relationships that I have been trying to build with people who make open source because of the amount of burnout that they experience. I don't know what better to do except just try to get to know people so I can commiserate at least. And so when I see people, when I see all of us feel like we have to react to something, I see the scale of that. I see what happens when 100 people get mad that like don't even know you, and you're like it's hard. So the best thing I can think is that we just need to keep talking to each other and trying to build each other up, because it might be hard for us to turn off even with this critique. It'll just internalize, and so the solution is not to always walk away, but it's to try to like heal and rebuild and do that with personal relationships, because it was the anonymity, the anonymity that that really what caused all the pain to begin with.
It's just like forgetting the human on the other side of the avatar, you know. Whether you're just emailing someone or commenting on a ticket or sending a pull request or whatever, it's so easy to just get disconnected from the reality that like there's always humans on the other side.
Yeah.
And they're going through who knows what in their life, and they're thinking about who knows what, and they're doubting and struggling and whatever. And we just kind of push that aside and like, okay, well, I know that I have a need, or this isn't met, or whatever, and think we can unfortunately just kind of dump. And I don't know if you guys feel this way, but there's almost I felt this impulse sometimes where if I have like a bad experience with a product or library or something, I'm like, you know what, the internet should know about this. Like there's some sort of justice impulse, I think it'd be, to be like, I should probably take to Twitter with this. Like people need to know that I had a terrible experience. And again, in that moment, I'm not thinking about the bigger picture of those people trying to, not even trying, just doing their very best to build something great, you know? And if I was there, I would be doing the exact same thing. And, you know, just completely forgetting about that and just focusing on the fact that I had a bad experience and I should tell everyone, everyone should agree with me, and we should burn the house down, you know?
Yeah. Yes. It would be nice that if we could find a way, a place perhaps where we could communicate with each other in as a field, but where the sense of critique and the sense of like competition are kind of maybe put aside just a little bit, so that we can talk. And I've seen communities like that bubbling up, and I haven't seen any of them go like public yet, but I have seen communities where they will get together and it's like a safe place for like the person who wrote some amazing product to ask questions like, why do we use a button and not a div? Like, because if they make that mistake in their product, or they get that out in a tweet, or, you know, you have a bad experience with them, then the moment they fall short, it's easy for us to latch on. Because, you know, it's like we think if we share it, it'll like protect people from the same harm, or we'll find other people and then we'll like fix it or something. But it's like, that probably isn't the way to get the fix you want. But I do think that we need to work on the tooling to help us do that. Because there's a reason you thought that was the right thing to do. Because I don't think you're a malicious person. Like, I don't think that entirely was coming from the darkness inside. I think something was about, it was the thing to reach for. It was the tool that you had. It was the hammer to solve the problem. And so I'd really love to just encourage efforts to give us that space as developers. Because how else can you talk to someone, a developer at Apple or Google, if they want to make another custom element? Like, how can you talk to them in a safe place? Like, if we don't make it safe for them, then well, how are we going to how are we going to see this through together?
Yeah. Like, why won't you just tweet about your experience if there's no outlet, if there's no healthy outlet?
Yeah.
Do you think this is unique to the development community? Because I know, like when I think about CSS community, I think about you automatically, you know, and I know that you are the kind of professional that is always embedded in the community. I can't see you working by yourself, you know, you like to interact and contribute and give back. But we have this history with like Hacker News where there's a lot of negativity there. And then with the tech Twitter space, like lots of people, you know, Twitter changes the font and then everybody goes crazy, right? So how is, like, do you think that's only unique to developers, or is it just because we don't have a proper medium to make criticism?
Yeah. We don't have a proper medium, but we're up against that's the easy thing to say. It's easy. I live in the United States, and we just went through multiple major historical oddities over the last name your years
Yeah.
that were greatly accelerated by access to high-speed internet. The ability to instantly deliver it to so many people that can do something about it, that can change their mind about it, that like, okay, cool, we're playing with a fire now. This is cool. It's called Fire. It's really neat. We've created this place where you can go with your friends and throw fire at them, and it's cool. But maybe we could build a way to like heat homes instead. Like, this brick is neat. I threw it through this window and I broke it, but maybe we could use those bricks to build a hospital. So like, that to me is where we're at, is that it's easy for me to say, yes, it is a problem beyond tech. It is tech a problem, and as developers we feel like we're maybe like somehow more in charge, but what it is that we have contribution. We can contribute to the problem and we can contribute to the solution. But like, think of anywhere you've worked. There's project managers, there's people who can have vision for product without being able to code even. So we're part of a larger body. So it's not that devs are special in this, but I think we feel as contributors to the fire. We feel a special responsibility and a special attack and obligation and all these things, because we know, like, we kind of know how it works. Like, we look at Twitter and we're like, I mean, maybe I don't have the time and money to build it, but I mean, I know what's going on. And so you feel like a certain responsibility that it's like, oh, it must be, it's me.
That's such a fascinating topic. I feel like people don't really dive into the problems that generate once you start like going through that negativity route. And yeah, I would ask folks to always think about before you hit post, because there's definitely a human on the other side of the screen, and sometimes we forget about that.
There are people smarter than me who are finding this. So Marco Rogers has been, for me, the best influence for myself to think about identifying these problems and really seeing how not isolated they are. And we'll occasionally just get into something about web. Like it's like we're of this same, like, we're in the same world space, but it's like there are some of us who are like plotted up, looking out like eagles ahead of us to see what's coming. And I will say there are some people like that. So for those that feel like they can get more involved or take action, it's for me, like, folks like Marco Rogers, whether it's a book recommendation or just something to consider that I thought might have been isolated, to realize how serious to take it so that I actually do something about it. There are people like that.
That's such a cool topic. One thing I heard, I don't know exactly actually why I just thought of this, but I think it's related. One thing I heard the other day was there's not a direct correlation between increase in information and increase in wisdom. And I think that's an interesting reality to grapple with the internet. Of it's easy to get kind of puffed up that we have access to quite literally everything on the internet, and for that to make us feel like we have there's a one-to-one. If as long as we have information, then we know what to do with it, or we know how to take action and everything. And I think there's a humility maybe for us to acknowledge that we also need wisdom, and like in those interactions, like in communication. In one sense, it doesn't even matter how much information you have, but having the discretion to know, like, how do I, like you were saying, how do I actually get this problem solved? Like there's a path of least resistance that I can communicate about the problem existing. That's the easy part. But like for me to sit down and actually think about what is the way that I could solve this, not only for me but for others, that's the part that's like you have to really put your mind and even heart into and collaborate. And have you found ways to like do that? Have you found examples in your own life of like you were going to go one way and then you were able to kind of redirect and you found a bit of success?
Yeah. The hardest but best choice I made was to realize that while I found Facebook to be harmful, the reason I needed to like get off that site was actually that I lacked the emotional weight to be on there and cause any positive change. And so that to me is a choice that really helped me make future choices. Like it really opened the door because I felt like it was an impossible thing to do at the time because I had like job connections and like people that I just didn't know how I would be in touch otherwise. And it was easy to blame the platform, but what helped me get off was to say, well, actually, I'm part of this problem. And sometimes you just have to recognize like, oh, I'm DDoSing myself. Like I'm giving myself so much information that I'm the kid crying on the floor with all the presents around them. And that's it's a lot harder to do than it is for me to tell you about it.
Wow. I want to put that phrase in a poster or something. I feel like I DDoS myself every single day, man. That's really good. Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes like to like help something, you have to just remove yourself from it, right? Maybe that's the best way to help it. If you can't like make an actual change, then just maybe that's one way of changing, right? If many people remove themselves from that situation, then they can cause some change.
Yeah. And there's different people that do that with different tools. There's tools to help you stay focused that work for some people and they don't work for others. And that is okay too. But that's why I wish we had better tools for talking to each other so that other really weird, excitable people like me can say like, all these popular tools that don't work for everybody, this one worked for me. And then, oh, cool. Like, because there are dozens of us among the millions that could really thrive from finding like better ways to, maybe have an outlet to put stuff. Like a good example would be like, I am one of those people that have continually suffered with making a VS Code window be open and then occasionally just opening up a tab and taking some notes and writing an idea down and then going back to my code. And I never saved that file. And eventually I will open up a project that I haven't opened in a month and there's like 12 tabs of like, I wonder what custom at rules would look like. And the project is like, a Next.js server side. like what? Well, maybe I need to find a better way. So I need to still work on that. Find a better place to take these tangents because right now they just become unsaved windows in VS Code. I'm sorry. I'm still working on it.
One thing that I find amazing is that you have been like extremely prolific on the open source arena, like creating plugins and creating projects and not only from now, like just like looking back, like from the Normalize.css days until now, you still have been able to keep that energy. So like, have you, like, how do you feel nowadays? And have you experienced some burnout during like all these years? Is this like mostly like a wave of productivity that you usually have? Like you dedicate a lot of energy to plugins and then boom, like someone leaves a comment or it's just like so much work, then it's just like, how is that experience for you?
Once upon a time, there was a channel that I will not name, but it was an IRC channel where a bunch of jQuery enthusiasts would go. It was like a off-topic kind of little place for ourselves. And if anyone knew me when I was on there, I was like an emotional roller coaster. I was very immature. I had very boisterous, really, really terrible opinions on things, and just a lack of understanding. Like, I could be caught bold-faced not understanding something that I just thought I knew. Well, remembering that completely blanked my mind on whatever it was we were talking about. But I will say
Burnout.
Oh, yeah.
How are you doing?
So,
Tell us how you're doing.
yeah. So they would get me out of it. I would get picked back up. I actually, I'm really sorry to everyone to say that I have been burned out for about 10 years and I can't turn off either. But like, instead I just thought, well, since I can't turn off, I just keep going. And then I just would find that I forgot how to relax. Like, I forgot how to like certain things that I thought I would mature at, with like when to go to bed, when to wake up. They happen thankfully because of necessity, because raising kids, like this structure is helpful and I can follow it, because it facilitates my family. But I feel like every few months I look at my projects and I start shaking, and I go on a long run or a walk, and I just won't go to bed that night, and I'll just be like freaked out. And so I have learned that my solution is not to just like, oh, I just need to balance this one thing better. Instead, I need to start thinking about like, why do I do these things, and maybe just try to get to know myself a little better, so that I'm willing to like forgive myself when the burnout hits me hard. And then maybe from there, I'll find a way to like tone down. But I will plead with all of my friends, like, I'm not going to pick up side projects. I don't want anything right now. I'm overwhelmed. And the best I could do is try to hide in a cave. But then someone says, oh, we'd really love it if we could build this thing, but it's not possible. And like, it's just highly improbable, but but here's a code pen. And like, because that could set that person on a different path. There's too much opportunity. Someone builds something cool and they're feeling a little overwhelmed, and you could get onto a Twitter DM and chat with them, and they can, did this happen? Oh yeah. They suddenly realize they're not alone. It's like, I can't walk away from that. Even though I'm kind of suffering it too, I like still need to be in there, because I'm not alone in that suffering. And so I haven't figured that out, except maybe I'm trying to get to know myself a little better. So I'm not so hard on myself about it, because it can be really bad when you think, oh man, why do I not like this project that I love? What did I do?
Wow. Yeah, my wife was just talking to me about how like sometimes we try to normalize life. So we try to find the optimal state, whether like thinking sleep and exercise and work and purpose and all these little ingredients that we put in just the right amounts, and then we kind of get that stride, that optimal state, and then the goal is to stay there. But I don't think that's how humans operate. I think there's natural ebb and flows, and those ebb and flows look different each person. And I think if anything, it's to optimize for how to keep the ebbs and the flows going. Like if we get stuck in any of them, that's when we should be worried. But as long as we're continuing to go through, that means we're progressing. That means we're continuing. We're living. We're alive. We're learning, and each one might be harder. But then if we get past the last one, well, then that means we can get past the next one. And
yes,
But I
Yes.
always go to the first. I'm like, okay, let me just find that perfect state, and let me just try to stay in that boundary and that limit, but that ends up not being actually optimal for me, at least.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Like
you're
not
saying-
sharing the emoting like I used to in the like IRC channels, that didn't make it go away.
Yeah.
Maybe I matured, but the pain was still there. But what you said, it is like you're saying, like we realize that we can't resolve or avoid this conflict. So instead, we're going to have to manage it. Mm-hmm. And I think that is a very wise thing you're saying for life and mm-hmm. for people who get involved in open source and realize that they're burning themselves out, but it's because they also just happen to find their passion. Mm-hmm. And so they feel stuck as well. Okay, you might not be able to avoid or resolve this. So now it's time to think about how you're going to manage it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And if you allow yourself to feel bad about your project, right? Like you create something and then it's amazing on day one and you share it and people love it and it's so cool. 3 years later, you completely hate it, and it's okay to hate it. You're not a bad person because of that. And you can always make it right if you have the energy, or you can just shut it down too. That's fine as well. But you have to just, manage it. Yeah, totally. Yeah. Well, one
Johnny,
thing
you have the answer.
Yeah.
Don't rely on me. That's not
You can buy Johnny's new book.
You mentioned jQuery, and I remembered that theme song that you wrote for Yaya Query podcast. So I'm wondering if you are still into music and how that affected your career as a developer.
Yes. If sometime out there in the universe, Tracy, you hear this, you asked for a theme song about 5 or 6 years ago, and I wrote it for you. And I can't stop writing music, but for some reason, I can't ever make the time to budget to buy the musical equipment. So, I keep writing albums. I keep writing music. I keep writing music about the web. But I can only occasionally share really weird stuff when I just, have to get it out. And it's not, who knows if it's if it's the best or the worst, I don't know. But it is silent. There are many more jQuery albums and there are many more theme songs. And I can't, if an exciting thing happens, I just go over to the piano, but I currently don't even own a keyboard. So I can't even record. This is a mic from the 2000s that I bought. I just don't know why that's happened. It's super weird. And even my dad is what, if you don't do it, then don't buy it. But if you keep doing it, what do you, and I'm like, there's so many things to build. Once I finish this project.
Yeah.
Okay. Ask me in 13 weeks.
I would be excited about a full album about the web.
Me too.
It would be amazing.
Maybe in 13
I would love
weeks.
to share about it.
Maybe, yeah. I'll be waiting. Let's see, 13 weeks. That's, what is that? October?
Just as soon as we have parsers in Rust and Go that hook into JavaScript for compiling HTML, CSS, and JavaScript as first-class citizens, then I'll write that album about my thoughts on the rise of Webpack.
Oh, that's great. Well, this has been such a nice conversation. Thanks so much for your transparency and talking about your journey. And I think you're inspiration to everyone listening and to me, and I think I would say for Zeno, and keep doing what you're doing. I know it's hard, but keep up the great work. But to close, I would love to know what something on your desk, could be hardware or software, that makes you excited to come back to your desk every day, right now. Yes. Is that a basil plant?
This is a basil plant.
Oh, that's beautiful.
There was a fellow who was growing a basil plant. He cut off a stem and gave it to a 15-year-old kid. I was hanging out with his dad because we both like Super Mario Brothers 3. And his son was like, "Can I give you a piece of that basil?" And so then he gave me a trim of that. So this is called life. And what's really great is, unlike code, I can take care of it and try to maintain it. And I can also walk away from it and it will be okay. And the more I take care of this life, I'm hoping I'll take better care of mine.
Wow.
Okay. End of the episode. That was beautiful. Thanks for listening to this episode of the ByteTalk podcast. You can subscribe to be notified of our weekly episodes. And of course, if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, comment, and share with your friends. See you next week.